Annyeonghaseyo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I get into the discussion, I would like to take a minute and introduce my company, Dynata. With over 40 years of experience, we are a pioneer in first-party data collection. That means we own 100% data and our panelists. Our approach to quality and our global reach makes us one of the most trusted source of data suppliers. Now coming to my introduction, I'm a quantitative researcher with 16 years plus of experience. I look into data research services requirements for our APAC region. And my work has worked across categories, as you can see, FMCG, telecom, consumer durables. And my work experience has also been one of the leading research agencies, Kantar, Nielsen IQ, as well as on the client side with Tata Docomo. Now, moving on to the topic for today. In Korea, we take pride in the depth, precision, and rigor with the work we do. However, but somewhere we have started confusing more questions. Do they mean more insights? What we say is that today, one of the major research challenges which is emerging isn't just about reaching the right people, but it's also about earning their best answers. So what do we propose? We are saying less is more isn't a compromise. It's a smart way to move forward. We asked all of you, what do you think has the greatest impact on the quality of research results? Now, the answers are not unexpected. Of course, solving the problem through research is our first priority. But what I want you to focus on is the second most important aspects, rightly put across by all of you, that sample design and screening comes out as the most fundamental for us in terms when it comes to the research. And I want you to take a minute to see how its role has evolved in defining the research strategy. Historically, the brand index studies, all of you must have done at some point in time or the other, right? And what sort of targeting we looked at was more of a national representative from 20 to 60-year-olds. Of course, it's a legacy type of a study which has been conducted and is valid till today. But it was majorly focusing on the strategic, larger goals and business results, but at times did not give us the immediate marketing action which was needed. And if you come forward to today, what we are seeing is, especially in tech sector, that the research doers, they're focusing more on single user case, which is a very, very hyper narrow targeting so as to call that term super narrow targeting. What we do get is sharper insights for the immediate improvement, but they lack the bigger picture. So what we are saying is super narrow targeting not right? It is right, but we do need a balance. And just to prove this point with a simple example, if we were testing a new fragrance-enhanced fabric softener, we could look at the target audience through 3 lenses. The target one specifies, if we were to just look at, in general, the laundry doers, we would focus on the category expansion. However, if we were to focus only on our category users, which is fabric softener users, we would gain the measure of share we can capture from other brands. And third, if I specifically focus only on my brand users, I will be essentially focusing on loyalty and retention only. The larger picture is that targeting should focus on the research purpose, but the broader it is, the larger the opportunity is a principle that we all should keep in mind. Now, why am I talking about targeting? Because targeting directly impacts the incidence rate. I'm sure many of you would have heard of the term incidence rate a lot during your discussions. So what exactly is the incidence rate? It's the percentage of people who qualify for your survey eventually among the total screen. Let's say I send out a survey to 100 people, and out of them, 20 actually qualified to be part of my survey, which is called as the incidence rate. Now, there are high incidence surveys, means my respondents are easier to find. So these surveys are faster, they're also cheaper. But the ones with low incidence are difficult to find. They will be taking time in the project, as well as they'll be very expensive to do. A very quick example to explain the three types of incidences. For example, if I were to do with a survey with anyone who has purchased a phone in last 1 year. Now, the phone replacement is a high frequency category, right? Every one of us will replace phones every 1 or 2 years. So we can easily find such people who will replace phones, and hence it's a high incidence category. Now, if I were to add a layer, I am looking only for premium phone users in last 6 months. So I've added another complexity to the condition. So this becomes a medium incidence survey, another layer. I want to find specifically this person who has switched from brand X to brand Y in last 3 to 6 months. We are going further narrow. And this is called, again, a low incidence survey. So the narrower you go, the lower the incidence, the more expensive the project, and more time taking in the field. Now, why would we talk about incidence rate? Because when we looked at the incidence rate compared to the global researches being done, we found that Korea significantly lags behind in terms of incident rate. Now, what could be possibly driving this low incidence rate in Korea? Of course, there are many reasons. Like, for example, it could be privacy sensitivity. We are more sensitive. The panel provider you're working with, okay, the quality and the reach could be an issue. You're actually doing a survey for a category which is low incidence. However, one of the major fundamental drivers of this, we feel, is the narrow targeting norms being set by the research doers, which we saw in the previous presentation, how there is a change in the overall organizing decision-making which is happening in the companies, right? Previously, from a centralized decision-making to a decentralized one, people are working in individual units, they have their own goals and setting their own targets and the researchers are supposed to comply to that. However, this is also fine. But what we are trying to say is, keep the principle in mind. The broader the targeting, the larger is the opportunity. Now, finding right people is one part of the story. The other part is, how do you keep them engaged? And we know that engagement is a function of many factors, right? It varies, starts from the topic relevance, the length of the survey, the question type variety, the incentives you're being given, the mobile optimization, whether your survey is optimized to be viewed on mobile, and also how much are you giving me progress? Am I moving fast on the survey or is it still too long? But we want to focus here specifically on the length of the survey. We feel that it is one of the most overlooked variables in the rush to get the research out of the door. And now I want to show you a fact related to survey length. Again, when we compared the length of the survey compared to our global counterparts, I think, please let me know if you find this shocking or not. I was very shocked to see at the metric that Korean interviews, they run longer, as high as 53%. And this is not a one point in time data. When we looked at the trends, we saw that there was no major drop which has happened over last 4 years. We are well, again, above the global norms. So the question is, does Korea need to rely on extended LOIs? We don't propagate the need of extended LOIs because we feel that there can be certain trade-offs which can be happening underneath and which will eventually come to the surface might late. And I would like to prove this point with 3 examples to you. Here is an example of an open-ended question which appeared in the survey in the beginning of the survey itself. This is question number 8, if you focus. And if you look at the response given by the respondent, it's pretty easy to understand. There is a rationale and a clear frame, right? We asked another question, much down in the survey, question number 38, as you can see, and you can analyze the type of response. It's hardly 2 characters. we have often witnessed that as the survey gets lengthened and the open-end responses keep coming at different point in time in the survey, towards the end of the survey, the type of open-end responses they get impacted. And what you now see on screen is actually a response from an experiment where we saw that respondents actually, they get tired. What you see on y-axis is the length of open-end responses, and what you see on x-axis is the question order. So as the question, you more get into the lengthier questionnaires, the number of open-end responses, they tend to decline. So the quality declines. Another example. This was a question which was asked, how much do you like these animals? And we gave a slider question to respondents. What they were supposed to move this slider either left or right to give their response. What we noticed is that gradually, again, as the survey becomes lengthier, the tendency of respondents to move the slider left or right actually decreases. And what you see on the next slide is actually the result of the experiment. This question actually garnered a 10% non-response in the beginning, and this percentage of non-response actually increases to 16% when it moved towards the end. So what we are saying is the sign of respondent disengagement and not just boredom. Another type of example which I would like to present to you is around qualifying questions. Now, what are qualifying questions? A question, imagine a survey on travel experiences, and I'm asking you, when was the last time you had a short break holiday of 2 to 3 days? And there are two, options possible. I key in the year, then a set of questions will appear, or I can select, have not been on any short holiday. Now, this sort of a question, which opens the series of questions, is called as a qualifying question. What we have also noticed is, in the longer surveys and respondents, over time, they are more likely to use their knowledge of survey mechanics and structures to skip a section as they encounter it further into the survey. And what you see, the data of the graph on the right-hand side says that the same question, which had 90% plus qualification, actually drops to 80% by the time if the same question appears in the fag end of a lengthier survey. So hence, the cognitive fatigue is setting in and silently enters in the data is all we are trying to say. Just to summarize, we think we need to rethink about the length, about the quality, and reset our habits. We need to match the targeting to the research goals because targeting shapes outcomes. The larger, the broader the base, the bigger will be the opportunity. Avoid hyper-narrow screening, and that kills the feasibility. Long LOIs, they hurt the data due to the fatigue which is setting in, the skip rates, and it also drops and impacts the data accuracy. When we design the research that respects the respondent, we get the data that respects the truth. Thank you. Kamsahamnida.